After some big moves in the offseason, the heat is on for the Los Angeles Kings, and they are expecting a postseason push this season. We'll see if they are able to get there on today's special preview edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, your team every day. The NHL season is less than a week away, and Locked On's season preview coverage continues as we welcome in Eddie Garcia, the host of Locked On LA Kings, to detail everything you need to know about the Los Angeles Kings ahead of the 2023-2024 season. Eddie, thanks for joining me. We are all excited for the NHL season to get underway. For those that are looking to follow the Kings a little more closely this year, what's the biggest storyline surrounding the LA Kings coming into the season?
Well, the biggest storyline for the Kings is expectations and meeting and exceeding expectations, specifically getting out of the first round of the playoffs. 2 years ago, the Kings surprised some by making the playoffs, maybe a year ahead of schedule on their rebuild. Last season, again in the playoffs, but both times losing in the first round to the Edmonton Oilers. Now, each year, the Kings have added players through trades and free agency. Philip Deneau, Victor Arvidsson. Last season, you had Kevin Fiala, and this season in the offseason, Pierre-Luc Dubois. They are spending to the cap this season, and not just making the playoffs is not good enough anymore. The organization has pretty much made it known. They expect the team to advance in the playoffs. So the storyline this season is just making it to the playoffs, not good enough.
You alluded to it a little bit already, but what was the biggest move of the offseason for the Kings?
Yeah, it's pretty obvious. I would say the second biggest trade in the offseason, other than Erik Karlsson, was the LA Kings making a deal with the Winnipeg Jets to get center Pierre-Luc Dubois. Now, the Kings did part with three players off of their roster, Gabe Vilardi, Alex Iafallo, and Rasmus Kupari, to get Dubois. So they did pay a hefty price along with a second-round pick, but specifically taking depth off of their roster. They then made a financial commitment to Pierre-Luc Dubois, 8 years, $68 million. So the Kings are now very strong down the middle. Anze Kopitar, Pierre-Luc Dubois, Philip Deneau. So the thinking was that LA needed to make a bit of a bold move to get over that hump in the playoffs, to be able to compete with the defending Stanley Cup champion Vegas Golden Knights, to be able to compete and defeat the team that's beaten them the last year in the playoffs, the Edmonton Oilers. I think it's very likely that they could meet one of those teams in the first round. So the Kings did lose a little depth, but they feel like, maybe Vegas hasn't really done much to improve. Edmonton hasn't really done much to improve. The Kings needed to be bold, make a big splash, go out and get a player that can really help them get over that hump. That's what they did. We'll see if Pierre-Luc Dubois can be the difference for the Kings this season.
Who figures to be the most important player on the Kings roster this season, and what makes them so crucial to the overall team success?
Well, I mean, I guess you could go with Pierre-Luc Dubois, but I think when you look at all the previews and what people are saying, I have to agree with them, because the LA Kings, I thought, and a lot of people thought, their biggest offseason move would be to address their issues in net, and they addressed it, but did they really address it? They went out and got veteran goalie Cam Talbot. So Jonathan Quick, Cal Peterson, all gone. They did not weren't able to re-sign deadline pickup Jonas Corposalo. So they bring in Cam Talbot, who's now 36 years old. As you know, as a Wild fan, a couple years ago had a fine season in Minnesota. Last year, though, not so much in Ottawa. So are they getting the Cam Talbot from 2 years ago? If so, that could be very, very good for the LA Kings. If they're getting the Cam Talbot of last year in Ottawa, then they may have to lean on Phoenix Copley a lot this coming season, who did a fine job for the Kings last year. But I think if Cam Talbot can recapture that form from a couple years ago, that would be a very, very big piece for the Kings into not just getting to the playoffs, as we've said, but advancing into the playoffs. And the Kings are likely improved, obviously, with Pierre-Luc Dubois down the middle. They also re-signed Vladislav Gavrikov on defense. So the thinking of the Kings, and we've seen this around the NHL, we can get a goalie who's hopefully good enough, surround him with a better, supporting cast, and that will be good enough to get us not only in the playoffs, but advance in the playoffs. So Cam Talbot will be a key for the LA Kings.
Every team is looking for that breakout star as the season gets going. Who is a potential breakout candidate for the Kings that fans of the team, whether they be the diehards or those fans that are checking in as the season gets going, who's that potential breakout candidate?
Well, I think there's a couple to keep an eye on. Former number 2 overall pick Quentin Byfield certainly is a guy that's getting a lot of heat here, even though he's still very young and very raw. But he's going to play on the top line with Andre Kopitar and Adrian Kempe, and he really helped that line out a lot while not putting up the numbers himself. He helped those guys to have their best moments of the season when he played with them. You've also got a really young, good defenseman in Brant Clark, who I think is a candidate, really good offensive defenseman, but he's going to probably play on that third pairing, quarterback, the second power play unit. But I'm actually going to go with the guy that's been with the Kings for a few seasons, forward Arthur Kaliev, second round pick in 2019. This is his third year now in the NHL. It looks like he could get some top 6 minutes with the LA Kings this year. He is very good on the second power play unit as well. He's got an elite shot. He just needs to shore up his defensive game because Todd McClellan's not going to give him those minutes to put up those numbers if he's going to be a liability defensively. So if he can just come in, shore up his defensive game a little bit, he can get the ice time to put up some solid numbers. I think if that happens, he can replace the production of Gabe Vilardi this year.
All right, Eddie, the question that everybody's asking about, we teased it at the top of our preview here today. What does a successful season look like for the Los Angeles Kings? And to piggyback off of that, what's at stake if it is not achieved?
Yeah, it's pretty obvious what the success would be, and that would be, again, advancing in the playoffs. Now, maybe if they play a team that goes on to win the cup, or it's a great 7-game series, multiple overtime games. I mean, there's always exceptions. If they feel the team was just right there and maybe didn't get the breaks, maybe they figure that that's acceptable. But it seems to me that it's pretty clear, again, make the playoffs and advance into the playoffs. And what's at stake could be the head coach, Todd McClellan's job. He's in the final year of his 5-year deal. They did not extend him to go into the season. Rob Blake played for Todd McClellan in San Jose. He hired him as the head coach. That's his guy. So I think if he felt confident that they were where they needed to be, they would sign him to an extension. They didn't do that. So I think it's pretty clear they're telling Todd McClellan, again, playoffs aren't good enough. We need to advance. If that's the case, you'll get rewarded. If not, we're going to find somebody else to get the job done.
For more on the Los Angeles Kings, make sure to follow Locked On LA Kings on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube so you never miss an episode. And make sure to check out the season previews for all 32 teams across the Locked On NHL channel, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.